One reading, Kuf Aleph Mud Aleph 101a. Before we go to the Gemara, I just want to quickly address something that someone said yesterday about candle lighting and lighting candles where you eat. I mean, what you do when you're being invited out, you light Shabbos candles at home, but you're not eating there. So just to explain very briefly, I've written about this in the past, and if you remind me, I'm going to find the article somewhere, I'll send it to you. It was in the Mosaic ones. The short, the essence of lighting candles on Shabbos is a very practical one, historically. Historically, meaning in the pre-electronic days, in the before Edison, before light bulbs in your house. It's a very practical thing. If you don't light candles before Shabbos, it's dark in your house and you can't enjoy Shabbos. So the sage is established, light candles. That's the mitzvah. It's a very practical one. Unlike, for example, the Hanukkah candles, where it's not about the light. We say, right, when we read the paragraph after we light the candles, we say, we have no permission to use the light of these candles for Hanukkah. So there the mitzvah is to light the candles, not to produce light, but to light the actual candles. The kindling is the mitzvah.
So Hanukkah candles are not allowed to derive pleasure
Correct.
from them.
That's one of the reasons
for reading, but Shabbos candles we can use for reading.
You are supposed. Well, reading is a different story because there's the fear that you might tilt the candle to get more light out of it. So you're not supposed to read you're not supposed to read directly in front of a candle. But the candle is meant to derive pleasure from. That's the point of it. It's a practical matter. Hanukkah candles not. It's one of the reasons for the shamash, that if you're next to it, you're enjoying the light of the shamash, not the light of the menorah. Today it's not an issue because you have Edison. But for Shabbos, okay, so now when it comes to enjoying the light of the Shabbos candles and the fact that the sage has established that you should light candles before Shabbos so that you have light in your home, what element of enjoyment were they highlighting or stressing? So there are two ways to think about this. One is that the expression is you shouldn't trip on sticks and stones. Right? So what's the point of the light? You could see when you're walking around the house, you don't bump into each other. One way of thinking about it. Excuse me. The other way of thinking about it is so you can see what you're eating. Right? So the light you're producing with your Shabbos candles, is it meant for your meal? Or is it meant for when you walk around the house, you can see where you're going? Now this is a very big difference. And do I fulfill the mitzvah before electricity came around? Do I fulfill the mitzvah when I light Shabbos candles, not where I'm going to eat? Well, if the reason is because you have to see what you're eating, then I didn't fulfill the mitzvah because I didn't have the light where I ate. If the mitzvah is I shouldn't trip on anything or bump into other members of my household, and even if I'm eating somewhere else, but if I'm going to walk around in the room where I lit the candle, then I fulfill my obligation to light candles. Meaning in your hallway upstairs, you can light candles in theory.
Yeah, but we would have still had lanterns a couple of hundred years ago because the candles would not last through the night and you need them for the following evening. You need light, right?
Right.
In the home.
In the old days, they used to live by the light of the sun. They got up at sunrise and they go to sleep at sunset. That was the end. Right? But on Shabbos, you're up much later.
Yeah. So
you eat later while it's dark outside.
Sholashot is after Minta, right? Okay. They would have lanterns in their house.
Presumably, probably.
Otherwise, I'm going to daven by the moonlight.
Daven mincha early.
Okay, well, what about?
I'm sure they have candles. I don't know. It's a good question. But the question is, the candle lighting was meant for a Friday night,
right?
Either not to bump into anything or for light at your meal. Okay. Nowadays, the whole thing is arbitrary because we have electronic lights.
Yes. We
can see what we're eating without lighting Shabbos candles, and we can see where we're going. So it becomes a big question, which is discussed in quite a bit of the early commentaries. Oh, we're discussing the Shabbos candles. Okay.
Yes, bring my course.
So it becomes a big question nowadays. Why are we even making a bracha on the Shabbos candles when we have electronic light? What purpose does it serve? We're not using it to see anything, right? So all of the sages agree that we still make a bracha on the candles. And it's similar to what we learned yesterday about making Kiddush and Shul on Friday night, even though there's no use for it anymore because there are no guests. but the sages established it, so you keep it going. So likewise, the sages established to light Shabbos candles as part of the mitzvah. We do it, even though we don't really need that light anymore because we have.
It's beautiful.
So what purpose does it serve? Beauty. What does it beautify? What does it beautify? It beautifies your meal. It doesn't prevent you from bumping into someone. It doesn't prevent you from tripping on something because you already have electronic lights that do that for you. So what purpose does it serve in terms of enhancing your Shabbos? It makes your meal much nicer. Like you go to a nice restaurant and they light candles because it's
warm.
It's good ambiance. Oh, so there is a use to it. There is a element that it brings to beautifying and making your Shabbos more enjoyable, which is the essence of the mitzvah, to make your Shabbos enjoyable so you can see your food, so you don't trip. So now it doesn't stop you from tripping. It doesn't make you see your food, but it enhances the experience of the meal because you have candles there.
But doesn't the
Sorry?
the mitzvah making Kiddush, you have to look at the candles while you're making Kiddush?
It's a custom, yeah.
It's a custom, it's not part of the mitzvah.
It's not the essence of the mitzvah of Shabbos candles, no.
Not the essence of the
No.
mitzvah, but part of the mitzvah.
Yeah, but you wouldn't justify a bracha, making a bracha on your Shabbos candles so you can look at it during your Kiddush, unless, right, because the essence of the mitzvah again is that the candle should bring pleasure to your Shabbos, which it doesn't anymore considering we have big lights, but it kind of does because it enhances the meal. Okay, now if that's the case, two things. Number one, if say for example, you're in a hospital over Shabbos, and we'll say for a good thing, so a woman's having a baby, then, and she can't light candles in her room. So what should she do? She makes a bracha on the electric lights. Turn the electric light off, make a bracha, and turn the electric light on. Because again, the function of the Shabbos candles is to produce light so that you can see what you're doing. That would be quite literal in the hospital. Which would mean, in theory, you could do the same thing at home. You had no candles, turn the lights off in your dining room, make a bracha, turn it on. And now you could see your meal, which was the function of the Shabbos candles to begin with. Right? That's point one. Point two is, because the whole Shabbos candles now is to enhance your meal, the candle should be lit in and around where you're eating. By your dining room table, presumably. Sorry? It's a bit different in the sense that, yeah, I guess it's the same kind of thing, but the Kiddush is, the mitzvah of Kiddush is the bracha. Not the drinking of the wine, but the bracha itself. And the bracha has to be done in the place where you're going to eat. We're going to learn soon why. Taisus mentioned this yesterday because the pasuk says, 2 days ago, the karasa Shabbos onig, you should call Shabbos a delight.
So it's wrong.
Right? So you have to call out the Shabbos, your Kiddush, in the place of your delight by your meal. But when it comes to the Shabbos candle, it's a very practical thing. It has to enhance your meal, otherwise, what's the mitzvah?
I actually just heard something about the candle. Nice that as Chava, when she, with the whole apple and all that, she took the light out of the world, and now every woman every Friday night light the candles to bring light back to the world. Right.
So when you dig into layers like that, like the drush and the side, like the mystical parts of it, you can find multiple layers. On the basic halachic level, it's to bring the light to your Shabbos meal.
So if I'm invited out for Shabbos.
Oh, so what do you do? If you're invited out for Shabbos, what do? You're not eating by the candles anyway. So what mitzvah is there to those candles if you're not eating by the candles anyway? Right?
My wife she lights before leaving.
This is what everybody does, but the question is how we do that and why we do that, considering that the whole point of the mitzvah is to enhance the Shabbos meal, and it's not enhancing the Shabbos meal because you're invited out.
Right.
So how do you make a bracha on that? The very fact that we make a bracha today in the presence of electric lights is itself questionable. Okay, so we rely on the fact that the candles enhance the meal, but now it's not enhancing your meal anyway because you've been invited out.
Is it to bring in the Shabbat?
The bringing in the Shabbos, technically, you do verbally. So you say Kegavna in Shul, or Baruch Hu in Shul, Chadodi, or even just say, I'm taking on Shabbos, which she does when she makes the bracha. But you don't need the candles to do that.
Doesn't go to synagogue where she has little kids and they're not at synagogue.
So in theory, she can just say, I'm taking on Shabbos, or not say it at all, and Shabbos comes in on time anyway. But you don't need the candles to bring on Shabbos. It's the bracha she makes on the candles that indicates she's starting Shabbos. But it, technically speaking, doesn't need to have the candles. Okay, so the solution to this is one of two things. Either, this is what most people do. I don't know what most people, this is probably the simple solution. When you come home, you drink a cup of water by the candles. So you've done something with the candles, like you've enjoyed the candles' presence sometime on Shabbos related to your eating. Or others do is turn the electric lights off, turn them back on, light the candles, and when you're making the bracha, you have in mind both the electric lights and the candles on your table. And the electric lights, you definitely can make a bracha on because that's stopping you from bumping into each other, which is the primary mitzvah of having candles. That's another solution.
There's also
It's commonly overlooked, and don't worry about it. Don't stress if your wife never did it, and don't make your wife crazy to do it. But this is a technical way of dealing with it.
There's also two other different things.
Yeah.
That are, to me, they're so helpful. One is that the kids at home get to know what Shabbos is
Right. See, this
by the lighting.
all of these things are all because the sages set up our observance in such a fashion, it creates this kind of environment in the house.
Yeah.
But when you're doing a mitzvah, making a bracha, you have to know what's the essence of the halachic mitzvah here. The essence of the halachic mitzvah is not educate your children about candles.
No, but you want
It's a byproduct because the mitzvah is to have candles. So when the kids see it, it creates an environment and so on and so forth. But what's the mitzvah itself? Someone living alone also still has to do that mitzvah, right? What is that mitzvah? Right? And the essence of the mitzvah is to enhance your Shabbos experience, which means when you make that bracha, it has to be made over some light that's enhancing your Shabbos experience.
But it's also telling you that it's Shabbos now.
Right, that's a byproduct. That's not the essence of the mitzvah, though.
No.
Right? It's not.
It's secondary help.
Correct, but you can make a bracha on that.
No.
That's the point.
No.
The
So the-
essence is to use it as electricity.
The essence is to derive benefit from the light you're producing.
It's funny because
So you could do it using electricity also.
for Hanukkah it's the opposite. You're not
Exactly.
supposed to use
So
it.
when it comes to Hanukkah, the mitzvah is to kindle the lights, not to produce lights, but to kindle. And if your candles go out, if your Hanukkah candles go out, you don't even have to relight them because you already lit. When it comes to Shabbos candles, the mitzvah is to produce light, not to kindle light.
But you can derive pleasure from the shamash.
The shamash is not part of your menorah.
Right.
It's not the mitzvah of Hanukkah. It's a separate candle.
Right.
Yeah. So the simple solution is to have them to like turn on the electric lights and have in mind the electric lights, and that way your mitzvah is on the light being produced in your house in general.
I'm not sharing that. with them.
It's actually, by the way, on mitzvah on the man to go around the house and make sure that the lights are properly lit for Shabbos and properly turned off. It's
Yeah, I do
your
that.
obligation, by the way,
I do that.
to do that before Shabbos.
Otherwise,
Otherwise, you'll be sleeping in the light.
yeah.
It's my job
But I
too.
guess if you're not eating at home, though, when you get back, you should have candles that last long enough.
Right. Which is why the simplest
Or
solution is the
just
electric.
use the electric.
Exactly. Never mind the electric lights in your house. You can have in mind all the lights in your house, the hallways, everything, because that's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to produce lights so you can enjoy your Shabbos, including the lights in your bathroom and hallway upstairs, right? Because it also helps you enjoy Shabbos. Right? It's a very practical, technical thing, the Shabbos candles, on its basic halachic level. To enhance your Shabbos experience so you can see what you're doing.
A Shabbos light is also
Okay.
very,
Sorry?
A Shabbos light is also very practical.
Yeah, these are very good practical things. Okay, let's go to the Gemara now. So we are on Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph. Yeah, is that clear? Any other questions on the Shabbos candles issue? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 lines from the top of the page. Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph
Just
101a.
one quick thing.
Yeah.
I was away for the Shabbos.
Yeah.
I didn't light candles. Probably should have. But I know my wife is lighting.
So where were you?
Mine.
Your host lighting Shabbos candles? Then you probably should have lit candles. Yeah. It's again, at the end, it's not the worst thing because you had electric lights
Right.
on. So it's like, so the end net result of the mitzvah you had anyway.
The bracha.
But you'd never the bracha. The net result of the mitzvah you had anyway because you had electric lights, right? And you before Shabbos made sure that the electric lights are on, right? So you did the mitzvah technically speaking,
The bracha.
but the bracha you could have made, yeah,
Okay.
to light where you're gonna. But if you're being hosted somewhere where there's candles being lit, then your host would have you in mind. Your host would cover you, just like when if you ate out, you lit candles at home, but you're eating from the candle someone else lit. Their candles cover you. The question is why you're making the bracha on the ones at home, and that's what we're discussing already.
Sorry, last question.
Yeah.
If we go, let's say Shabbat to my parents' house, and my wife lights them at my parents' house
Even better.
before Shabbat comes in, that's fine.
Even better.
She doesn't need to light at the
No.
house also. We're not there.
No.
Okay.
You're eating at your
Reading like that.
you light there.
Just
Yeah.
have lights in your house.
You should have lights in your house before you go, just so you can walk around and not.
There's no bracha or anything on
No,
it.
no.
And I don't go back to my house. It's in St. Lawrence. So
No.
all of Shabbos.
Why the-
we're-
Oh, all Shabbos you're there. Definitely light candles there for sure.
That's your lights in your parents' house.
But they're not coming home for Shabbos. They're staying
No,
Shabbos the
Oh,
whole.
that's coming home,
No,
sorry.
it's far.
So definitely light there. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, 5 lines on top of the page. The 4th word. So we said 2 days ago, and we learned the Shulchan Aruch yesterday based on that. we learned that the Kiddush made in Shul on Friday night, the intention there is so that guests who are eating in Shul fulfill their obligation. But those who are local do not fulfill their obligation with that Kiddush. This is what we learned. So Shmuel's view, unlike Rav, who was of the view that the Kiddush in the Kiddush in Shul Friday night is meant for people who don't have to make it again for their families at home, because you don't need to make Kiddush in the place where you're eating. You can make Kiddush in Shul and eat somewhere else. That was Rav's view. But Shmuel's view is the Kiddush in Shul is for guests because they are eating in Shul, and the locals don't fulfill their obligation. And this is the Shmuel Taimei. And Shmuel follows his own thinking. The Amar Shmuel, which Shmuel said, and here's the phrase that we're going to be learning about over the next little bit. Ein Kiddush ela b'makom suda. One cannot make Kiddush unless they are making Kiddush in the place where they are eating, in the place of their meal. As I mentioned before, from Tosfos says that this is derived from the verse. The verse says, "The karasa l'Shabbos oneg." You shall call Shabbos a delight. The simple meaning of the pasuk is that you should refer to Shabbos as a delightful day.
It is.
It is, right? So the karasa Shabbos oneg, you should refer to Shabbos as a delight. That's what it should be thought of. But the literal translation is, you shall call out to Shabbos a delight. When do you call out to Shabbos? When are you calling out Shabbos? Kiddush. Kiddush is your declaration to sanctify the day. And the pasuk says you shall call it out a delight. Meaning, when you call out Shabbos, it should be right by your delight of Shabbos, namely your Shabbos meal. This is how Tosfos says we derive this halacha that ein Kiddush ela b'makom suda. So we said like this. Sover minei, we derive now from this, from the fact that Shmuel said, when we make Kiddush in Shul, it does not cover, you cannot, only those eating in Shul, namely the guests, can fulfill their obligation with that Kiddush, but those going home cannot, because you have to make Kiddush in the place where you're eating. Hani mili, this is true, mibayis labayis, if you're going from one house to another, from Shul to your home, one building to another. Ava mimakim lamakim b'chad beisa. But what if you're going from one place to another in one home? Is that okay? You're making Kiddush in your dining room or in your kitchen, and you're going downstairs to the basement to eat.
You're still in the
Well, it
same
would be like
dwelling.
a shul.
Oh, so it says, no issue. We're going to get to the details of this when we get to the Shulchan Aruch, but the Gemara is laying down all the various different scenarios as we're going to learn. Yeah? So at this moment, we're assuming that's not a problem. Because Shmuel's problem was when you're going from Shul to home, two different buildings. But if you're in the same building, it's fine. Make Kiddush in one room, eat in another room, so long as you're in the same house, same building.
But you're not seeing the candles.
Right? Because we're going to get to the Shulchan Aruch. That's correct. That's a little sneak peek. That's right.
But you're not seeing the
Easter.
candles.
Sorry?
You're not seeing the candles.
When you make Kiddush,
You make Kiddush.
you lit more than one candle. You're not seeing the candles when you make Kiddush. Let's say. You still fulfill your obligation of Kiddush even if you don't see the candles, technically speaking.
Yeah, but it's still nice to eat at the table where you make the Kiddush.
What's nice, we know. Question is what the halacha is. Okay, so this is the Gemara's thinking at the moment, that making Kiddush in two different locations in one home is okay. Making Kiddush and eating in two different locations in one home is okay. The issue is only from one building to the next, like going from Shul to home, which was the primary, what's the case zero, patient zero, that brought this whole discussion to the table. So continues the Gemara. Amalahu Rav Anan bar Tachlifa. Rav Anan bar Tachlifa said to the people who made this conclusion, the people who derived this conclusion, that that Shmuel's issue with making Kiddush in the place where you eat is only between buildings, but if you're in the same home, it's okay. So the people that were discussing this, Rav Anan told them like this: Zimnin Sagin, on frequent occasions, have a kamina kameh de Shmuel. I would stand in the presence of Shmuel. The nachas, and he would go down meigra from the top floor, la'ara to the ground, v'hadar mekadesh, and then make Kiddush, indicating, it would seem, that he would be eating upstairs, but come down to make Kiddush downstairs. Clearly, Shmuel is of the view that if you're in one home, it's okay, even though you're on two different floors. When we get to the halacha, we're going to see the halachas about this, But this is the Gemara is thinking at the moment, deriving from Shmuel. We're gonna learn more when I'm not done.
But you can't go back upstairs after the meal and say your blessings after the meal.
You have to bench in the place where you eat as well.
Where you eat.
Yeah, that's another set of halachas as to how far away you can be. And discussed in brachas at great length. You learned brachas recently, right? Right? Yeah, so it's just discussed there in great length. The Gemara continues. Va'af Rav Huna too, Savar is of the view. So it's not just Shmuel, it's of the view. In the meantime, we have Shmuel and Rav. Rav says you don't have to make Kiddush in the place where you're eating because he said you could fulfill your obligations from the Kiddush and Shul. Shmuel says you do have to make Kiddush in the place where you're eating, at least in the same building. Now, Af Rav Huna Savar, Rav Huna too, says the Gemara, is of the view that ain't Kiddush el b'makom soda. That Kiddush is to be done in the place where one eats. And if not, the Kiddush is invalid. As the Gemara tells us, Rav Huna Kaddish, Rav Huna made Kiddush, and this akra le shagra, and the candle fell down and went out before he ate. So he made Kiddush ready, but now he can't eat in that same place because the candle went out. Discussing the fact that the candle has to be the place where you eat. It's a practical thing. You have to be able to see the food you're eating. Now he can't see the food he's eating because he just made Kiddush and the candle went out. So what did he do? Says the Gemara, Va'ailale lemanya lebei ganina deraba bre. He went up to, I don't know how to translate this directly, but essentially he went to like his son-in-law's house, or his son Rabbah. He went to his son Rabbah's house, and it was a house that they built for like, it used to be a thing when their kids got married, they built them like a home.
Extension.
Yeah, so he went to the place to this house that was built for his son, Tahabashaga, where there was light there. What did he do? The Kiddush, he made Kiddush again. The Toy Midi, and then he ate something. So he made Kiddush once, candle went out, he had to move locations to eat somewhere else, made Kiddush again, and then ate. So Alma, that's correct. Alma we derive from here, because Savar, Rav Huna's of the view, and Kiddush el b'makom soda. The Kiddush is only to be done in the place where you're eating. Now what's interesting about this? What exactly is this other home that his son had? Is it in the same building? Different building? If it's the same building, then he's being more strict than Shmuel. Shmuel said, at least the way they understood it, that you can go to in the same house, it's fine. If his son lives in the same building as him, just different room, then he's even more strict because he went from one room to the next and he still made Kiddush again. Unless this happens to be a different building. Then we have no inference that he's any different than Shmuel. Right? This is something to think about as we move forward into the Shulchan Aruch.
Not clear. I didn't catch all of it.
Not clear yet, that's correct.
But it's not bad to do.
Sorry?
It's not bad.
Now, if there's a second home, a second dwelling on the same property, and if there's an Arab, is that considered?
The Erev issue is not an issue here. The issue is not carrying.
I think maybe if you can see.
The issue is not an issue of carrying.
Or you're
The
technically
question is,
carrying-
that's correct. The issue is, can you see the place? Right, you have to call out your Kiddush in the place of your delight. So when you're calling Kiddush, do you have visual
It may be like the shul scenario where the
similar. It's correct.
Anyway.
Correct.
cheating from seeing.
That's correct. It's correct. Okay, we're going to get into all of this. Let me get to the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, continues the Gemara. Va'af Rabba Savar ein Kiddush ela b'makom soda. Rabba too is of the view, like Shmuel and like Rav Huna, that Kiddush must be done in the place where one eats. The Amar Abaye for Abaye said, Abaye was adopted and raised by Rabba. His father passed away at a young age, and Rabba took care of him. So Abaye said, Kiavina Be Mar, when I was at the home of my master, like our esteemed master, meaning his teacher and adopted father, Rabba, Kiav Makadesh, when he would make Kiddush, Amarlon, he would tell us, Ti'imu midu, eat something. Eat something. Dilma ada azlisilo shpiza, maybe by the time you get to your host, where you're going to be eating the rest of your meal, Miss Akra Lachushaga, the candle will go out, and you won't be able to eat anything. And therefore the Kiddush we're doing now, and therefore you won't have Kiddush in the place where you're eating, Uva Kiddush Dehacha, and the Kiddush we just made now, loy nafkisa, you will have not fulfilled your obligation. Because the ain't Kiddush Makom Suda, because Kiddush has to be done in the place where you're eating. So when he would make Kiddush, we were going somewhere else to eat. We're hearing Kiddush from him. He would tell us, eat something, just to make this Kiddush valid, and then go eat your meal. Because if not, maybe by the time you get there, the candle's out, you won't be able to eat, you won't be able to make Kiddush, and the Kiddush you just heard now is nothing because you didn't eat.
When he goes to the other place, does he make Kiddush again?
No,
No,
because he ate something.
He ate something.
Exactly. But what's interesting is,
But are you really eating where you're making Kiddush?
so what are we learning here? That you don't have to eat your whole meal in the presence of Kiddush. Eat something.
Something that.
Time midi,
that constitutes-
eat something, and that constitutes. Because the issue here is not that your meal has to have Kiddush. It's that your Kiddush has to have a meal. Correct. So as long as you're doing something, eating something in the presence of your Kiddush, it's enough. We learned yesterday that there's even one view that the cup of wine you're drinking constitutes the meal in the presence of which you're making your Kiddush.
a certain amount.
That's correct. So as long as you're eating something that requires an after blessing,
Right.
there's different views, but at least according to one view, that constitutes eating in the presence of your Kiddush. Because again, the issue is not that your meal has to have Kiddush. It's that your Kiddush has to have a meal. So as long as you're eating something in the presence of your Kiddush, it's fine. Go eat your meal, wash somewhere else.
A lot of people do like right when they get home from synagogue, Kiddush and a little aperitif, eat a little, and then eat only 30, 40 minutes.
And that's
later.
perfectly fine. That's what we're learning here.
That's a
Perfectly fine.
limited case though, because you can't wash for bread then. You could satisfy a meal with wine,
Correct?
but
Or
not-
mezainis.
not- Oh, okay, with mezainis.
Correct. We're going to learn even we'll learn the Shulchan
But
Aruch,
if you bench, then your meal is over, right? And then-
right?
Okay, but
Nothing
you
to do.
satisfied Kiddush.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
The issue
point.
is not that your
You
meal
can
has to
eat
have.
a meal
That's correct.
somewhere else, but you've satisfied
That's correct. The
Kiddush.
issue is not that it's not ein suda elam makom kiddush. It's not that your meal isn't the meal unless you make kiddush. It's the reverse. Your kiddush isn't the kiddush unless it's in the presence of a meal. So long as you ate something, you satisfied kiddush. Have your meal whenever you want.
And you satisfied your meal.
Correct. And the precise language is true even in the story of Rav Huna earlier, where Rav Huna went to his son's house. The Gemara says he went to his son's house, b'toy midi, and he ate something. It doesn't say and he ate the meal there. It says he ate something. Again, making the same point. It's not a question of making sure that your meal has a kiddush, but it's a question of making sure your kiddush has some meal in it.
And meal isn't defined by the way it's usually defined in halacha, meaning wash.
Okay, so we're going to get to that exact. The Shulchan Aruch, we get to different views as to what constitutes a meal that satisfies your kiddush. At the base level, like we learned yesterday,
Yeah.
as long as you're eating something that requires an after bracha, which is the cup of wine that the guy drank in the shul, that would be enough, at least according to that view. According to other views, you have to drink a second cup of wine, because the first cup of wine
It's for Kiddush.
was for kiddush. Second cup of wine, your meal, and that so there's a view like that as well. We'll get to all of that in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, I think we still have a few more lines in the Gemara to do tomorrow before we get to the Shulchan Aruch. Right, because the Gemara takes a little bit of a detour, but then comes back. So we'll take that detour, God willing, tomorrow.
Just,
Or I'll look up the Shulchan Aruch. Maybe we'll do the Shulchan Aruch before we take the detour.
if I'm making Kiddush, let's say at the Kiddush club,
Okay.
do I need to bench for Miss Musa? Or can I carry that
Yes.
forward?
No, you used to be benched before Musaf.
I have to bench before Musa.
Whether you don't is what you do afterwards is a good question, but the best case scenario is to bench. Because you're going into a zone in which you're not going to be eating,
Right,
right? So to do that and not bench is not correct.
right. So I have to make Kiddush again afterward,
No.
after Musa.
No, I have to make Kiddush again.
Make Kiddush,
Yeah,
let's say Kiddush club.
you make Kiddush,
Now I'm gonna.
you ate something,
I ate something.
so your
I'm
Kiddush is
gonna
now
bench.
satisfied, you benched, you go
Right.
to Musaf, why are you making Kiddush again?
Satisfied you.
Right, why are you making it?
What if I have to make Kiddush for my wife?
Oh, so now you're making for her, it's a different story.
Okay,
Right, so now it's not your obligation anymore, it's hers. And we learned yesterday in the Shulchan Aruch that a person could be making Kiddush for someone else, even if they're not being fulfilled, even if they already fulfill their Kiddush.
so otherwise.
Right, the guy who made Kiddush in Shul, he fulfills his obligation and still goes home to make Kiddush again.
You drank the Revius and
Right? No, but what do we say? That if he drank the Revius, he goes home.
you make Kiddush.
If he had first family, he can make Kiddush again. Unless if they don't know how to make Kiddush themselves, right?
Right.
If they don't know how to make Kiddush themselves, he can make again for them. Right? Shabbos Day Kiddush is even easier because Shabbos Day Kiddush, the only bracha there is Hagafen.
Or Shakol.
Right, but there's no bracha on Shabbos by your day Kiddush.
No.
Your night Kiddush has two brachas, which
Right.
makes it more complicated. But day Kiddush, you're drinking a cup of wine. So you're making a bracha on a cup of wine, no
There's
problem.
no obligation to have bread.
There's an obligation to eat in the presence of your Kiddush. Otherwise, your Kiddush is not valid. So if you're making a second Kiddush for your wife, then your wife has to eat something. Otherwise, the Kiddush you made for her isn't valid.
Right.
Right? You already made Kiddush and you already ate something earlier. So your Kiddush obligation is done. When are you going to have your meal is irrelevant. But if you're doing Kiddush for your wife now, she has to eat something. Otherwise, her Kiddush isn't valid.
Okay, so.
The
if I
Kiddush you
make-
just listen to.
So if
That's
I
the
make
halacha we're learning
so
here.
if I make Kiddush before Musaf, if we're gonna, let's put my wife aside, I'm not making Kiddush for her. I do Kiddush, I have Kiddush before Musaf.
You ate
I
something,
bench, I ate, I benched.
benched.
Now I daven Musaf,
No need to make Kiddush again.
now I just make a bracha on what I'm gonna eat.
Yeah. It's correct. And you wash whatever you're doing. Right? That's what we're learning here. He went, they ate something, and then they went off to their hosts to eat whatever meal they were eating. Okay. There's more coming on this, and we'll get much more detail as we get to the Shulchan Aruch. So stay tuned. Have a wonderful day, Eden.
Thank you.
Well,